Welcome to our weekly roundup of key economic and business developments in Sri Lanka. I'm Nishani Figuera, and here are this week's top stories. President appeals to parliamentarians to back IMF deal. Debt restructuring framework to be ready by May. Sinopec to pump fuel in Sri Lanka from July. Tourist arrivals to break 100,000 mark for the fourth consecutive month. In our top story this week, on Wednesday, President Ranil Wickremesinghe appealed to lawmakers in Parliament to back the IMF funding facility. He claimed that there is no other active option but to sign the agreement and that reforms are critical to address long-term weaknesses. The President commented that bilateral debt negotiations with the Paris Club creditors and India would be on a common platform, while discussions with China to be done separately without any prior conditions. A key point was on domestic debt restructuring. Mr. Wickremesinghe stated that there is a likelihood of its being also considered for restructuring, adding that despite some banks having expressed inability to cope with such action, it is important to do so to move the economy forward. According to Cabinet co-spokesperson Bandula Gunawardena, Sri Lanka's debt restructuring framework is to be ready by May. He claimed that the process is the biggest challenge the country is currently facing, adding that tracing the sovereign bonds has been a tedious and complex task. As per the minister, Lazard Institute of France and Clifford Chance are constantly negotiating with the country's external creditors. Sri Lanka's Cabinet of Ministers authorized obtaining new financial and technical support worth $350 million loan from the Asian Development Bank. This is to aid the ongoing recovery of the economic crisis. Separately, the Cabinet also approved further engagement to secure $150 million from the World Bank to bolster stability in the banking system. According to Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara, Sri Lanka will sign fuel retail agreements with China's state-owned petroleum corporation Sinopec by mid-May. Operations are to commence from 45 days thereon. This follows Sri Lanka's intention to liberalize the fuel market through allocating 150 fuel stations to 3 foreign players. Australia's United Petroleum and United States RM Parks are the other parties which have expressed interest. In other news, tourist arrivals to the 23rd of April were 80,350 and is on track to beat the 100,000 mark for the fourth consecutive month. Year to date, almost 417,000 visitors have arrived. India was a top source market in April, and such are now allowed to use the Indian rupees in Sri Lanka. Almost 9,000 Chinese tourists have visited this year, about double the number from last year. Further, last week Sri Lanka Tourism conducted roadshows in 3 Chinese and South Indian cities. Sri Lanka improved to the 73rd position out of 139 countries in the latest Global Logistics Performance Index. Singapore topped the list with Finland ranking second. Meanwhile, a $392 million commercial and logistics complex is to be constructed in the port of Colombo. This is to be operated as a 50-year build-operate transfer. Venture partners are China Merchants Port Holdings, Sri Lanka Ports Authority and Axis Engineering. Now let's take a look at the weekly movement of the all-share price index and the S&P SL20 index at the Colombo Stock Exchange. At the Treasury bill auction held on Wednesday, yields on all maturities increased for the second consecutive week. Bids amounting to 207 billion were received, and of which 115 billion rupees were accepted. The Sri Lankan rupee fluctuation against the dollar this week was between 321.6 and 321.8, according to the central bank's indicative mid-spot rate. And with that, we wrap up for this week. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel at the link below for more updates on economic and business developments in Sri Lanka. Until we see you again next week, thank you for watching. Stay safe.